Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. It's great to see all of you. I'm Jennifer Ferrari, the proud CEO of ERDi. And each month we have this great opportunity to come together as an ERDi community to explore topics of interest. This month, I'm delighted to welcome Dr. Rick Surrency, who's the superintendent of Putnam County, Florida. Recently, he had the unique opportunity to travel to Finland as a U.S. delegate to learn about the education system. And today, in our very casual meeting, he'll be sharing some of his high-level learnings and open up for Q&A at the end. Again, thanks so much for joining us. And with no further ado, Dr. Surrency.
Well, thank you, Jen. And it's always a pleasure to, partner with ERDi. And I've learned so much, not only from ERDi, but from the people who attend that. And it's always great to come online and just talk. And I just like being informal and just sharing ideas. And first of all, let me just share who I am. I'm Rick Surrency. I'm an elected superintendent, if you've ever heard of that. That's pretty common in Florida. I have to run for office, and I was elected in 2016, re-elected in 2020. We have a bond referendum coming up in November, and then I run for re-election in 24. So we make sure we don't do both of those on the same election cycle. But anyway, our school board members are elected just like yours are, and they work with me. I don't work for them. So it's kind of a neat deal. But I do have to answer to the people. So that's kind of what I do, and I enjoy what I do. I've actually retired and I came back, and I'm in my 44th year. So I really enjoy education and just being a part of this. Going to talk to you a little bit about opportunity I had back in May of this year, and that was to visit the nation of Finland with another group of educators. And I'll get into that presentation right away, but I want to share a couple of photos with you. All right. Before I talk about Finland, I want to talk about two things that I think are probably real novel things that I want to share. And I know many of you have ridden in an Uber, and I've probably done there over 100 times just visiting places, but I've had some of my best experiences riding in an Uber. And there's two people there I want to introduce you to. First of all, the gentleman you see standing behind me with his fist up, his name is Trent Singleton. And I think I met him, Jen, when I was in Chicago at the last ERDi. And he was my Uber driver. And as soon as I got in the car, he said, "Just want you to know I'm famous." And I said, "Okay, that's good." And he gave me his name. He said, "Google my name." So I Googled his name. And Trent Singleton is best known for being a boxer. He is a professional boxer, and he fought Mike Tyson in 1985 in Mike's second fight. So I said, "Wow, that's pretty cool." And we did a little selfie here at the end, but I had to ask him how he did against Mike. And he said, "Well, he knocked me down twice, but I think the ring was too small and I couldn't get my jabs in. So whatever it takes." But I guess he didn't get his ear bit off or anything, but that was kind of a neat thing. The other guy is a guy named Jerry Brooks. I don't know if you've met him before, but he is actually an educator, and he is actually on the speaking circuit now. And you might have seen him on Facebook. He is a well-known speaker for teachers, and has, especially during the pandemic, he's got on there and really does a lot of comical stuff for teachers, but he is in high demand as a speaker. And he like has to, schedule things a year out. But he and I rode in an Uber together. I think it was Atlanta, and had a good opportunity just to talk and see how he was as a person. So whenever you get into an Uber, make sure you talk to the driver. You never know who you're going to meet. And you might even have a passenger in there that's kind of cool. So, okay. Y'all bear with me a minute, but the title of the presentation is Educational Equity Through Values-Based Leadership, Trust, and Collaboration in Finnish Schools, which I know you can read that. There's a nice little shot of Finland out of my airplane window. But here's some of the folks that will actually be presenting today. We're going to play some brief clips. Two of my colleagues, Michael Robert, who's the superintendent in Phoenix, Arizona, and Dr. Kristen Rickey is the superintendent in the West Delaware School District in Iowa. So we got to know each other pretty well, and you hear a lot about them. And I was just very honored to be with them and several other U.S. educators. There were a total of 8 of us. And we are actually going to share some information about Finnish history, which I think we can learn a little bit about their education system by looking at their brief history. We're going to talk about some of our visits to elementary schools and high schools, and then we're going to talk about teacher training. And it's going to really blow your mind how teachers are in such demand and highly trained over there. So that'll be part of our presentation as well. So here's a brief clip from Dr. Ricky, kind of give you an overview of our presentation today. So stand by.
Hello, thank you for being with us as we share our experiences in Finland as part of the Fulbright Leaders for Global Schools. I hope through our presentation we can begin to share a sense of this amazing experience and create space for you to consider what this might mean in your own leadership practice. The opportunity to immerse myself in the Finnish education model and to share that experience with colleagues from around the United States was truly an experience unmatched.
Okay, so briefly, here's the group that went to Finland. I think one or two of the people there were a host, but it is part of the Fulbright Foundation. And not sure if you've heard of that before, but this is actually a private, independent, non-profit organization that's based out of Helsinki, Finland. And they work closely with the United States, and that we send American educators over there. They send Finnish educators over here. And there's a lot of sharing of educational practices. So just a brief history of how I got involved. I actually saw this opportunity in the fall of 2019. I applied for it and was fortunate to be accepted. And then we were scheduled to go in March of 20. Of course, something came up that we all know about in March of 20. So the trip was canceled. It was ultimately rescheduled for January of 22. And at that time, that's when the Omicron virus became, very dominant in Europe. So we canceled that. So they rescheduled us again in May of 20. So I really didn't want to go in January of 22 because of it is so cold over there. This Florida boy just couldn't deal with the cold. But we went in May of 22, and it was beautiful over there. The way the Fulbright Foundation got started, just a brief little snippet about that, is that Finland is best known for being the only European nation after World War II to pay off their reparations. As part of the Marshall Plan, the United States and the other allies went in and contributed money to rebuild Europe. Well, Finland actually paid their debt, believe it or not. They paid a $300 million debt, to the Soviet Union, not to us, but to the Soviet Union. And the reason I bring that up is it really speaks about their culture. They're really big on fulfilling their obligations, having that, the highly ethical environment, if you will. So that speaks a lot to the people of Finland. So take a look at this map real quick, in case you didn't know where Finland was. It is way up high near the Arctic Circle. And we actually flew from all parts of the United States, and we flew out of Chicago. I think a couple flew out of New York, but we flew nonstop out of Chicago all the way across to Helsinki nonstop. So it was an 8-hour flight. And on the way back, I flew to Dallas nonstop, which was 10 hours, and then connected in Dallas and came back. But we were there almost 2 weeks. So we were pretty much inundated in the Finnish culture. Just a brief snippet on my personal story. When I went over there, they always say when you fly, make sure you carry a change of clothes in your carry-on. Well, I did that. And my big bag got delayed about 3 or 4 days. And I could come to find out it was sitting in the airport at Chicago, and they never did put it on the plane. But in my big bag, I actually had all my suits and all my dress clothes. And all I had to wear while I was there was jeans. So I was able to finally track it down and got my luggage about 4 days into the trip. But here's the bad part is, like the day before I got my luggage, I knew I was going to visit the U.S. Embassy in Helsinki, and you just don't wear blue jeans to the embassy. So I had to go the night before, go to a department store in Helsinki called Stockman's. I had 30 minutes before the store closed, and I had to go in there and find this little Finnish girl who worked behind the counter. And I said, I need a suit, I need a shirt, and I need a pair of shoes, and I need it now. And so we quickly got it together. She fitted me. The only other thing that was left is my pants were not hemmed. So she said the tailor would not be in for about 2 or 3 days. So I said, listen, I needed him now because I have a visit tomorrow. So she took it in the back, and bless her heart, she tacked it up real quick, and it appeared to be a success story. And I even tipped her an American $20 bill, which she liked. The next day I go to the embassy and everything's great. And all of a sudden my hem falls out. So I made sure that nobody saw the hem of my pants, and I kind of stayed behind a table so nobody could see my pants. But it was really, I go back now and I laugh at that now, but I was able to get the airline to pay for my suit, which actually is the suit I have on now. This is my Finnish suit. On the way back from Finland, we all had to take a COVID test to be admitted back into the United States. We all passed it. We were kind of holding our breath, except one of our colleagues from California, an assistant superintendent, failed the test, and he had to remain over there for an extra 10 days until he was able to go through quarantine. We left the day, coincidentally, we left on the exact day that Finland voted to join NATO as part of the whole Ukraine situation. So we weren't really clear on how things were going to turn out because they share a long border with Russia. But we were able to leave, and we felt better about that. So a quick story about the history of Finland. Finland used to be part of Sweden, used to be under the King of Sweden. And then in 1809, Sweden gave Finland to the nation of Russia. Okay. So Finland was actually part of Russia from 1809 to 1917. And, during the Bolshevik Revolution, when the communists took over in Russia, that's when Finland decided this is a good time to get away from Russia. So they declared their independence. So Finland became an independent nation in 1917 as a result of the Bolshevik Revolution. So in 1919, they officially became the Republic of Finland. That's important to understand because Finland is a relatively new nation, and a lot of their decision making has been about education. They, as a country, have decided to make education a major focus of their entire system. And I'll talk more about that in just a brief minute. So one thing I want to share about the Finnish people, and I did not realize there was this survey out there until I did a little research, but there's actually a World Happiness Report, and they survey all the countries you see listed there, and Finland is actually is the happiest place on earth. You thought Disney might be, but no, it's actually Finland. People are legitimately content, happy. It's not the rat rush over there like we're used to. People are just so friendly, and that really came out. And that was a real takeaway, from what we saw. But some of the undercurrent things that I saw in a lot of the Finnish people, they have a culture that's built on trust, contentment, and equity. So that's kind of the basis that we saw with their people. And also we're going to see that in their schools as well. And it's kind of like when you walk into, you meet people on the streets, they're nice, but they won't make eye contact with you for some reason. But again, they're very courteous, but it's kind of like people stay to themselves. So that's just one thing that stood out to me.
One example of the Finnish culture of trust that pervades their entire society was when I went to get on the bus with a group of people. Obviously, it's at a bus stop, so they're trying to stay on a time schedule. There's a group of people behind me, and my bus pass did not work. So when I got on the bus and tried to scan it, it wouldn't scan through. In the American system, that concerns me very much. My bus pass isn't working. There was a line of people behind me. What should I do? But the driver just smiled at me and waved me back. He trusted that I bought the pass and there must be something not working with it, but this wasn't a problem. Just go on back, have a seat, and enjoy the ride. That was much of our experience in Finland. No stress, no worries. It's fine.
So Dr. Ricky kind of outlines that culture of trust that we saw pervasive across that country. The other thing I want to share with you, which really is kind of the basis on what I'm talking about today, is just how well prepared the students of Finland are. And that's been measured starting back in the year 2000 through the PISA exams. It's a program of international student assessment, and they basically test all 50 or a sampling of 15-year-olds across the nations of the world, mainly your advanced economic nations. And you see there, dating back all the way to 2006, Finland is #1 in the world. The average, you see the black line in the middle, and then you see the United States far to the right. And that's both math and science. And I did not put reading up there because I didn't want to compare the United States with Finland at that time, because in 2006, the United States did not publish reading scores on the PISA exam. But again, since that time, Finland has been in the top 10% of all nations in the world. Here's a more recent one from 2018. Again, you see Finland in the red, and they've dropped a little bit, but they are still one of the top countries in the world. And you see the United States is behind them. So there's a lot of things that Finland is known for. I'm not here today to say they are knocking it out of the park, let's do what they're doing. That's not the intent of my presentation today. It's really about how can we enhance or learn some things about what they're doing, and maybe look at the United States educational system through the eyes of the Finnish culture and the way their classrooms work and the way they train their teachers. That's going to be the focus today. Matter of fact, they told us a comical story about they had a delegation of people from China come over there, and they visited schools, and Chinese people just want to get it done. And they said, just tell us how much this costs. We'll buy it and we'll take it back to China. They said, no, that's not the point. You don't buy this. You just understand what they're doing and try to incorporate it into what you're doing. So that was a real big takeaway for us. Here's a snapshot of the overall Finnish education system. Understand, they don't have a number of little school districts like we do. They have a national system. And you'll see that that they actually start 7 years, age 7. That's a mandatory age, and it goes all the way to 18. So 7 to 18 is a mandatory age. But they really have a lot of focus on early childhood education, taking care of their children. You'll see the predominant theme here is all basic needs of children, and really people in general, is the focus. They're really trying to focus on the equity of all people in Finland, and then to give them that opportunity to excel. So you see on the left-hand side, that's kind of the college track. Students can go through elementary school, go into an upper secondary school, and then go into a university, earn a bachelor's and master's, and so on. On the other hand, they can choose a vocational track when they get in upper secondary and become, really focus on job-vetted skills, licensing, certifications. But the big thing is, you'll notice on the right-hand side of the screen, there's a real big focus on work experience. And the way they get their funding is they actually are judged on how well their kids take part in actual work experience. Their internships and partnerships, they receive a tremendous amount of funding, but there's no dead ends. There's many choices. A student can start one track, change their mind, and then they can go on the other track. And by the way, another little side note, when kids go to school, they do not have school buses. So children are so much in a trusted, safe environment. Kids will actually get on public transportation or ride their bikes through the downtown Helsinki or whatever it takes, but parents don't worry about them getting to school by themselves. And that was a big takeaway for us. But no buses are provided there. This is one thing that we did when I present live. We just talk about, you know, their takeaways about their culture and what are some things you might predict about their educational system based on what you've heard so far. But we'll skip that part. But talking about the culture, the person who is the head of the Fulbright Finland Foundation that we met with, her name is Terry Mosa, had an interesting comment. She said, in Finland, all we have is nature, ourselves, each other, and education. And she even went on to say, we do not have oil. They don't have really any natural resources like that they can sell, except things like lumber and that type thing. So really the culture of Finland is based on, they live in a very rough culture as far as the temperature and a lot of wooded area. And people in Finland have to really work together, depend on each other, collaborate, and they really are connected to their natural environment. And we saw a lot of that in the schools that we visited. There's a word that's very common in Finnish culture. It's called sisu, S-I-S-U. And it's a Finnish word that really talks about 4 things: resilience, resourcefulness, determination, and grit. And really that defines the overall culture. You know, the fact that they have survived all this time as a nation, as part of Russia, and now they're independent, is because of that determination. Their self-reliance. They depend on each other. They depend on themselves. They do not really depend on other countries. And it was kind of interesting when they joined NATO, you know, they have really kind of been independent of all the conflicts in Europe. And they chose not to be part of NATO originally because they did not want to get drawn into some type of conflict. They just wanted to be left alone. But since the invasion of Ukraine, you know, Finland decided, you know, we really need to be aware of our reality and join NATO. So, you know, them and Sweden are on a fast track to be part of NATO. So I want you to hear from Michael Robert, and he's going to talk about the idea of equity over excellence.
Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be joining you, if only from video today. My name is Michael Robert, Superintendent of the Osborne School District here in Central Phoenix. You're going to be hearing lots of things throughout this presentation today. Lots of themes are going to emerge, but one of the greatest ones that seemed to stand out for me was the idea of trust and cooperation. Back in the late 70s, early 80s, when the Finns were looking at an educational system that had some struggles that they were able to recognize and changes that they needed to make, they looked to their schools as being a place where opportunity to learn would be available to everyone, regardless of income, regardless of their background, regardless of the neighborhood or the area of Finland that they were in. They looked to schools as instruments for being able to level out some social inequalities. Pasi Sahlberg, a famous author in Finland, and has spoken about educational issues in Finland since the early 2000s, was at a conference and speaking with folks and addressing the idea of excellence in schools. And one of the things that he really wanted to get across was this idea of the lack of competition that exists in the Finnish schools. It's really here in American schools. And he's talking about the fact that there aren't private schools in Finland, but then really got into the economic model of the United States and said, you know, you guys can shop and look for different things and make choices. Educational choice is really important. In Finland, parents can choose too. It's just that all of their choices will get them the same result. And that was a goal. There wasn't competition among schools or rankings or labels that put one school higher than the other. It was a matter of whether or not basic needs for all students were met. Basic needs of educational outcomes, basic needs of food, hot meals there for every kid multiple times a day. The basic needs for counseling or psychological services needed to be there, not just in this school, but for all schools anywhere, in order for them as a nation to move forward. It was going to be not only an individual equalizer, but a national stabilizer. And people were kind of quiet in the room. That's when it really dawned on them that the whole idea of trust and cooperation, when Finland set about making huge educational policy changes, excellence was never the goal. It was equity all along.
So, wow, big deal. Equity over excellence, or excellence through equity. And think about that for just a minute. In the United States, how competitive we are. And I always talk about the United States is almost like a zero-sum game. It's like we have winners and losers. In Finland, they're all winners. They want to make sure the equity is a focus. Just a couple little comments about culture life in the schools. And Dr. Robert talked about school choice. Kids can pretty much pick whatever school they want to go to. They have to provide their own transportation. But again, the whole idea about choice is, every school has a lot of the basic needs that other schools have. So it's not like they're competing with each other. They're real big on participatory decision making. And we visited one high school where the students there, were like on a student advisory council with the principal. And the number one thing they wanted were more meatballs at lunch. And that was a big deal to them. So the principal said, okay, on days we have meatballs, we'll make extra meatballs to make it more readily available for the students. So the students really have a voice over there, and they really want to make sure students, parents, teachers have that input that we all strive for. They are becoming more of a diverse nation. I know people think, hey, they don't have near the diversity that the United States have. And that's true. And they are becoming more diverse as more refugees, especially from Syria, have started coming in. And we've noticed that as time goes by, the culture of Finland is becoming more and more less monolithic, if you will. I've got some photos here of a playground that really stood out to me. These are two separate elementary schools. And one thing that really stood out to me was the lack of security. And, in the United States, coming from the United States, that really caught my eye because people could just walk up to the fence, could actually walk right on campus, and security was not even a big thing for them, which I know we have to based on our experiences, but that has not been a big thing in Finland yet, and I hope it never does. But they just have that such a safe environment, safe feeling. As a matter of fact, kids, when they go outside, even if it's raining or even if the temperature drops very low, they're so in tune to nature, they just go out there and play. So that's just something they're used to. Here's another little snippet from Dr. Ricky. It talks about the way that their culture and the way they look on teachers. So this is really interesting, talking about the Finnish teacher strike.
One thing that surprised me was when we learned that teachers in Helsinki were on strike while we were there. We didn't get to see the Helsinki schools, and instead they transferred us to a different school. But I expected there to be lots of anger and upset over the strike. In fact, that was not the case. People were very understanding. All the comments I heard were, well, the teachers do need to make more money, and so the strike is good. I didn't see angry people. I didn't see picket lines. I saw a sense of, we support the teachers, and this is how they get more money, and so good for them. It was a totally different approach to a strike than you might experience in the United States.
So that was interesting. And again, having a national education system, the strike actually rotated from city to city. So we went to two big cities and there was a strike going on each time we were there, but we were still able to visit some of the schools that were not on strike. They were like university schools. Again, here's a photo of our group in a Finnish elementary school. The lady in the middle there is the principal with the glasses on. But just a couple of things to take away. All education in Finland is totally free, all the way through the university system. Tuition is free. I mentioned to you that the mandatory age is 7 to 18, and there's a big focus on the fine arts. We visited a lot of classes where they did a lot of needlework, used power tools. I'm talking elementary school kids are using power tools, and I'm kind of like walking around looking for fingers and all that kind of stuff laying on the floor, but they really trust the kids. And of course, that would be a lawyer's, heyday in the United States. They don't have a lot of lawyers yet in Finland, so maybe that will be coming. And then a lot of the kids in classes, in the elementary classes, they played musical instruments. They sang together as a group. They actually, sang to us as a group. And also, multiple languages are very common. And you'll see in just a minute, you'll hear some high school kids talk. And these high school kids they know at least 2 or more languages. So that's a pretty much a basic theme in Finland, is just the way that, they travel to other countries, so they have to know the other languages. The basic schools or elementary schools, they have what they call learning nests. And these are basically little areas like you see there. A lot of times students will be in separate classrooms, and they'll come together in these learning nests and join together and do lessons together. The thing that really blew me away is they do not adhere to a pacing guide. This is the major takeaway for me. Whereas we're concerned about kids being on grade level by a certain time and being a certain place in the curriculum, that is not a big thing in Finland. And you'll hear Dr. Ricky talk about this in just a minute. Another big takeaway, every single hour of instructional time, 45 minutes of that hour is spent on the lesson, and then 15 minutes are spent outside play. So they go outside for recess every single hour for 15 minutes. So play is a big part of the curriculum. They have what they call phenomenon lessons, and these are really multi-content lessons where they combine content and they look at certain phenomenons, but they try to do it engaging, different areas of content together. And children are really take responsibility for themselves. For example, they in the cafeteria, I noticed kids go through the line, they get a plate, they serve themselves, hot meals, they sit down and eat, and they literally take those plates, they scrape the food off into a trash can, and then they stack their plates up. I don't always see that in the United States cafeterias, so that was a big takeaway for me. So listen to Dr. Ricky talk about the idea of slow schools. And this is not schools for students with disabilities. This is just the way that they conduct their the pacing in their schools.
The thing that resonated with me the most strongly was the differing sense of time in the Finnish system. We learned that the focus on the child, instead of meeting time-based outcomes, meant that they could create slow school, which is an unhurried approach to learning that enables the child to take as long as he or she needs while focusing on individual interest. Learning is flexible and responsive to student development. An individual learning plan is created for each student, not based on a predetermined scope and sequence, but rather based on the development and the progress of each individual student. This is facilitated by grade-independent grouping. As one Finnish educator stated, it doesn't matter what the grade level is. It matters what they know and what they're ready to learn. This lack of time pressure also meant that there was time built into the day for breaks. In the primary schools, each class is structured so there is a 15-minute recess spent outdoors every hour. There is an overall sense that there is time for everything. Time to learn, time to play, time for family, time for nature, time for pursuing individual passions and interests. In my opinion, the result is a much more peaceful environment which appears to be free of the intense competition and time pressure that we know sometimes results in high stress levels and mental health concerns experienced by many American students. It isn't that we don't have any of these positive aspects in our system in the United States, but there seems to be a much better balance in the Finnish system.
So that was a big deal to me. And think about, I think this really became evident after the pandemic, the way we are putting pressure on our kids. You know, we talk about social emotional learning and all that. Just the idea of the way the Finnish schools focus on, hey, let's just look at how kids can progress at their own speed. And it works. So again, I want us to think about that. Maybe if we have time to discuss it, that's a big takeaway for me on how we really need to change the pressure that we put on kids to be at a certain place in the curriculum. So the Finnish secondary schools, very quickly, again, student choice is really big. Students can go wherever they want to. They can choose whatever track. Sports and clubs are not part of high schools in Finland. They are all community-based. And I know people here would probably not find that very welcoming, but again, their focus is on learning and learning only. They do the other stuff outside of school. Their grade point average is a major determinant on schools that students attend. And by the way, if I didn't mention this, there are no standardized tests in Finland. None for elementary, none for secondary. And I will talk about in just a minute. There is one test that they take at the end of their high school career. But again, they just focus on their individual grade point average. And again, there's no dead ends. You can start one path, you can change your mind and go another path. So that's a big thing for their secondary schools. The matriculation exam, that is the only exam that's required for students that are in high school. And this is taken normally at the end of their 11th grade year or during their senior year in high school. But again, students prepare for the matriculation exam throughout their entire high school career. And you'll hear in just a minute some students talking about why that is important. But this will determine whether they go on a path to a university or on a path of into a more career focus, if you will, in post-secondary. And these exams are pretty involved. There's 5 different areas that they're tested on. Each area, it takes a day to be tested in that area. So a lot of time is spent preparing for that exam.
Secondary school, for a first year student at least, it hasn't been very competitive. You know, I think when we applied to upper secondary school, it was quite competitive because you needed a certain GPA where, you know, the schools would accept people in descending order of GPA until they ran out of spots to accept people into. But now this first year hasn't been very competitive. We've, you know, there's been a lot of cooperation, and the thing is that necessarily the grades we get from these courses that we're taking don't really matter. It's more preparing us and getting us the education to write the matriculation exams, because actually the grades you get from the different modules, so courses, the grades we get 4 through 10. If you pass the courses, the grade you get doesn't matter. The thing that currently matters when you're applying for Finnish universities is what you get on the matriculation exams, which you write, you know, at the end of your second year or mostly during your third year. So far it's not been very competitive, and there isn't, you know, a competition throughout the process. It's more the years that we spent studying here, it's more of a learning process that you focus on learning the material that you then can apply in the final exams.
So that was a conversation with some of the Finnish students, high school students. And the young man there was very vocal and very knowledgeable about that. And by the way, all 5 of those students spoke multiple languages. So, and they actually, by the way, their school was on strike at the time that we met with them. All those 5 students actually volunteered to come in and speak to us. So I was really proud of that. So let's talk about teachers and how the teaching profession is a little different in Finland. First of all, teaching universities, there's about 10 teaching universities in Finland, they have a very select acceptance rate. 10% of people who apply to their teaching universities are accepted. And now, how different is that than the United States today? But teaching is one of the most highly respected professions in Finland. And I always say it's much like the way we look at doctors, lawyers, and engineers in the United States. They spend a lot of time in training. They must have a master's degree to be a teacher. They spend a lot of time doing kind of like interning. They spend an excessive amount of time interning. So by the time they go into the classroom, they are top-notch teachers. Their pay is set at the national level, and that's kind of why you saw the national strike. Co-teaching is a very big thing over there. Teachers work together. But here's the big deal. Since they are highly trusted and respected, principals do not do observations or evaluations. And I know that probably really, puts frowns on people's faces. They don't require lesson plans. They truly look at teachers being the professional and understanding where their kids are as far as their student achievement. So Dr. Ricky is going to talk about a conversation she had that talks about the trust in teachers.
One experience I want to share with you that really struck me when we were in Finland was the time that one of the educators stated that they don't do assessments for their students until they reach the level where they're about to go to college. And my American colleagues and I found that really unusual because in our system, obviously, assessment is a big part of what we do. So when we said to the Finnish educator, well, how do you know that the children are learning if you don't do assessments? He looked at us sort of quizzically and said, the teachers are with them. The teachers know what they're learning. That sense of trust in the teachers was evident everywhere, but that statement, the teachers were with them, really says it all about the Finnish system.
Matter of fact, just a little added thing to that, I talked to one of the principals there that had a teaching vacancy, and she said they had over 250 applicants for one vacancy. So I don't think we're seeing that kind of turnout over here. But again, to be a teacher is to be someone who is highly respected in that culture. So just summing it up, key points about Finland is the idea of trust and respect is very dominant. Just a lot of mutual respect. And we picked that up when we were there. We were highly respected and trusted over there. And again, that's very evident in their school system. The idea of equity over excellence, instead of it being a dog-eat-dog world, which a lot of times we witness, it is about how can we take care of everybody in our country, give them equitable opportunity to be successful, not at the expense of someone else. And finally, student choice is a big thing over there. There are no dead ends. And if they feel like they're not being successful in one area, they can change and go to the other area. So we actually we were in Helsinki for about a week, and then we flew up to a place called Oulu, which is in the northern part of Finland. We actually visited the University of Oulu, and we did this little group work where we met with some of the university people. And just a quick summation of that, the group I was in, we actually did this Venn diagram comparing the United States on the right and Finland on the left as far as our educational systems. And I won't go through all this, but there are some distinct differences in our systems that we've talked about. And we really kind of put those on paper just to get an idea of just how different we are. But again, there's a lot of things that we do share in common. So I had a great experience, truly life-changing for me. Two things I want to point out is if you ever go over there, make sure you take part in the Finnish sauna. And again, everybody in my group wanted to do a Finnish sauna, but the only thing I heard is you could not wear clothes in a sauna. So that kind of freaked me out a little bit, but they all signed up for it. And they kind of shamed me into going, but as it turned out, we were able to keep our clothes on. But it truly was an exhilarating experience. You go into the sauna And then we actually dipped into the Baltic Sea, which was the coldest water I've ever been in. And the relaxation from that experience was amazing. I also was able to eat for the first time reindeer. And up in the northern part of Finland, reindeer is kind of like eating beef here. It tastes a lot like roast beef. So I was able to eat that, and that was truly an experience I'd never had before. Most of the places I went in Finland were they served a lot of salmon, a lot of fish, and I really got tired of eating fish. So that's all I have. We might have a minute or two to answer questions. And Jen?
Thank you so much. What an interesting time that you had. At this time, we really keep it just open. If anyone has a question or a comment or kind of something that stands out as something that was interesting or provoking, I welcome you to take the floor. Anybody?
I will jump in, Jen. And Rick, thank you so much. And I actually had the opportunity too to tour Finland schools back in 2018 with COVID.
Excellent.
So you're absolutely right. And I was just thrilled to hear that so much of what we saw is still going on. You know, you look at that, and especially the diagram that you put up at the end. How do we in our education system go about perhaps replicating some of those outstanding practices that they had with them? How can we do that?
That's a great question. And, you know, I came back with a new sense of showing gratitude and respect for my own employees. My district is 10,000 students, have about 1,500 employees. And, you know, my leadership team sat down and we started writing thank you notes to different employees. Every week we met, and we kept a spreadsheet. We want to make sure that we touch as many as possible. Just one example of how we can show gratitude, because our teachers and our employees have a tough job. And I know we can't just snap a switch and make the United States like Finland, but it's those takeaways. And I think we just need to do what we can to show more appreciation for the people who serve in education.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
And I think for me, having been in curriculum and instruction gal back in my past life, the importance of being able to take the knowledge and skills that we learn in school and not just regurgitate them for an assessment, but actually apply them in a new and unknown context should be our ultimate goal. And I feel like I do, in my position, get to see really great glimmers of application of this in school districts across the US. And I think if we could start somewhere, and it's just, again, doubling down on having kids apply their skills and knowledge in ways that they feel most comfortable and kind of not being so binary in the way that we assess winners and losers. I think that's a really ambitious but good place to start. And every day we're going to keep on trying.
And I talked briefly about the phenomenon lessons, where they really focus on, you know, problems that we face in the world, and they address those, kind of like project-based learning, if you will. Sure. But they use the different content areas to really address that problem. So you're spot on, Jen.
Thank you. And thank you so much, Rick, for being with us today and sharing your great experience. And just as a preview, we'll have next month, Erica Avila from Isaac School District in Arizona talking about high dosage tutoring and a case that they found great success with over their COVID experience. So have a great rest of the day. Enjoy the rest of the week. We'll see everybody soon. Take care.
Thank you again. Bye-bye.
Bye.